Okay, real talk for a sec. Have you seen those headlines lately? You know, the ones screaming about a Trump recession and the economy, like, totally going off the rails.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to miss them.
Right. I don't know about you, but they definitely make me a little nervous.
Yeah.
So we're going deep on all that today.
Yep, diving into all the juicy stuff.
We've got some fascinating economic analysis, expert opinions, oh, and even some insights from some pretty big names. Think Mark Cuban, Milton Friedman, the whole shebang.
Should be interesting. Yeah.
Definitely. Get ready for some, well, let's just say unexpected twists. Like, did you know low interest rates might actually be a bad sign? And that FDIC sticker you see at your bank, maybe not the ironclad guarantee you think it is.
Yeah, those Trump recession headlines are definitely attention-grabbing. But here's the thing. Those economic warning signs, they were already flashing before he even took office.
Oh, interesting.
Rising unemployment, the Fed cutting interest rates,
Mm.
all those were kind of red flags waving.
Now that you mention it, it does sound kind of familiar. Kind of like back in the 90s when Greenspan cut rates and everyone thought, oh no, here comes a recession. But then somehow we dodged it. Is there any chance we could pull off that kind of economic magic trick again?
That, my friend, is the million-dollar question.
Is.
But to even try to answer that, we need to understand what those low interest rates are really telling us.
Okay, I'm all ears.
One of our sources, the legendary economist Milton Friedman, he had this interesting argument. Basically, he said low interest rates, they can actually point to a weak economy, not a strong one.
Wait, really? That seems kind of counterintuitive.
It does, right. But stick with me here.
Okay.
Think about it this way. When banks, the ones lending all the money, see an economy that looks, well, a bit shaky, they get nervous.
Makes sense.
They start thinking, what if businesses can't repay those loans? What if things really go south? And that fear, that risk aversion, it leads to less lending.
Less money flowing around.
Exactly. Less money flowing through the whole system, which ultimately, well, slows down economic growth.
So those low interest rates, maybe they're not so much about banks being generous as they are about being scared.
You got it. It could be a sign they see trouble brewing on the horizon.
Okay, that's making me think twice about those headlines now.
It's worth pondering, right?
Uh-huh.
And speaking of things that might be less secure than they appear, let's talk about the FDIC.
Oh, you mean that little sticker you see at the bank, the one that's supposed to make you feel all warm and fuzzy about keeping your money there?
The very same. But one of our sources dug up a pretty unsettling stat. Apparently, the FDIC's deposit insurance fund only has enough to cover like 1.25% of insured deposits.
1.25%? Whoa, that is a lot less comforting than I thought it was.
Yeah, not exactly the safety net I was hoping for.
So if we had another, I don't know, another 2008 situation, multiple banks starting to fail at the same time, could the FDIC even handle it?
That's a great question. And it gets even more unsettling when you factor in one of the main culprits from the 2008 crisis, those complicated financial instruments called derivatives.
Oh, right. Derivatives. Aren't those the things Warren Buffett called financial weapons of mass destruction or something like that?
Yeah, those,
Not reassuring.
not at all. And according to our sources, they're still out there, big time, still a major risk factor. And the kicker, they're often tied to assets that aren't looking so hot right now.
Okay, so we've got banks potentially freaking out, low interest rates that might actually be a bad omen, and these weapons of mass destruction just lurking in the shadows. Is there anything else we should be worried about?
Let's not forget about a topic near and dear to many, many hearts, including yours truly, Social Security.
Oh, yeah. Social Security.
Yeah,
The program that's supposed to be there for us, when we retire.
exactly. But one of our sources, a former Social Security commissioner, a guy named Martin Ali, he paints a pretty alarming picture. He's actually predicting that Doge's recent cuts could lead to Social Security just collapsing.
Collapsing.
And not in some distant future either. We're talking within months.
Wow, that's a scary thought. Imagine being one of those, 72 million Americans relying on those monthly checks, and suddenly, poof, they're gone.
Definitely not a fun scenario. And it's not just retirees who would feel the pain either. Every time someone gets laid off, that's one less person paying into the system. And with unemployment numbers being what they are.
Yeah, it's like the whole thing is getting more and more fragile, kind of like a house of cards just waiting for a slight breeze to knock it down.
That is a powerful analogy and a disturbingly accurate one.
So it's not looking good for Social Security.
Not particularly. And it's not just former government officials sounding the alarm either. Even billionaire entrepreneur Mark Cuban is weighing in with some pretty stark warnings.
Wait, seriously, Mark Cuban, the Shark Tank guy?
Yep, Mark Cuban.
Wow, okay. What does he have to say about all this?
He's not just worried about those immediate job losses, although those are obviously a huge problem. He's talking about the ripple effects, the impact on families, communities, the entire economy.
Yeah, it's like that old saying, when America sneezes, the world catches a cold. If the U.S. economy goes down, it's taking a lot of other countries with it.
Precisely. In Cuban, he's actually drawing parallels to the 2008 financial crisis.
Oh, no, not again.
But he thinks this time it could be even worse. He's even using the term hyperinflationary depression.
Okay, now I have to ask. What exactly is a hyperinflationary depression? How is that different from, our regular recession or a depression?
Imagine, like, the worst of both worlds.
No.
You've got this deep economic collapse, right? But then you also have runaway inflation at the same time.
So prices are skyrocketing.
Through the roof.
Right.
The value of your savings, your money, plummets, and businesses are just struggling to stay afloat.
So basically, our money becomes worthless.
That's the terrifying reality of hyperinflation. It's definitely a worst-case scenario.
Okay, I'm officially spooked now.
But it's a scenario we need to be prepared for, just in case.
So is there anything we can do to protect ourselves if this economic hurricane actually hits?
That's where our sources offer a glimmer of hope.
Oh, good. I need some of that right now.
And it might surprise you.
Okay, lay it on me.
It's not just about stocking up on canned goods or buying a bunch of gold.
Yeah, that's what I always hear about.
It's important, but it's not the whole picture.
What else is there?
One of the most important things, one of the most crucial elements of getting through a crisis like this is community.
Community. So it's not just about every man for himself.
Nope. It's about coming together, supporting each other. Think about it. In times of uncertainty, our neighbors, our friends, our families, they become our most valuable assets.
Our human connections are more important than gold.
In a way, yes. Helping each other out, sharing whatever skills and resources we have, building up that local resilience.
Okay, that does make me feel a bit better. So we've got community. And our sources also mention something about gold and silver. What's the deal with those? Are those just for, doomsday preppers, or is there something more to it?
Precious metals, like gold and silver, they're often seen as what we call hedges against inflation.
Hedges against inflation.
Meaning they tend to hold their value even when regular currencies start losing their buying power.
Oh, so when the dollar starts, going down the drain, gold and silver can help you stay afloat.
Exactly. One of our sources even pointed to historical data, showing how silver, specifically, kept pace with the rising cost of food during times of high inflation.
Interesting. So it's not just about getting rich, it's about, preserving your wealth over the long run.
Exactly.
So maybe it's time for our listeners to dust off those old coin collections. Or, visit a local coin shop.
It might not be a bad idea to explore those options. It's all about diversifying your assets, thinking beyond the usual stuff like stocks and bonds.
Okay, so we've got community, diversifying with precious metals. Anything else we should be thinking about?
This is going to sound simple, but it's crucial. Understanding how these economic forces work and how they might affect our lives.
Right. Knowledge is power.
It really is.
Yeah.
And when it comes to something as important as our financial well-being, well, the more we know, the better equipped we are to make smart decisions.
So let me just recap here. We've talked about a potential Trump recession, the FDIC maybe not being as solid as we thought, a looming Social Security crisis, and even Mark Cuban's warning about a hyperinflationary depression.
A lot to digest.
It is. But I feel like I'm starting to get a handle on this whole economic landscape now.
That's exactly what we were hoping for with this deep dive. Remember, it's not about panicking. It's about being prepared.
Prepared for whatever might come our way.
Exactly.
Welcome back to our deep dive. Before the break, we were talking about some pretty unsettling stuff. Potential Trump recession, the FDIC maybe not being so reliable, and even that whole hyperinflationary depression thing.
Yeah, definitely not the most cheerful topics.
I don't know about you, but I'm kind of ready for some good news now.
Me too.
And our sources did hint at some potential solutions, some ways to navigate these crazy times.
Right, it's not all doom and gloom.
Exactly. So let's dig into those, shall we?
Sounds good to me.
One thing that came up a lot was the importance of community.
Yeah, community's huge. Even when we're facing these big economic challenges, we can still take steps, to mitigate those risks and make ourselves more resilient.
We talked about that a bit earlier, but I'd love to hear more about what that actually looks like. It's easy to say build community, but how do we actually do that, especially in a world where it feels like everyone's so disconnected?
That's a great point. I think it starts with a shift in our mindset. We got to move away from that whole every man for himself mentality and embrace something more collaborative.
So instead of hoarding all the toilet paper and canned goods, we should be thinking about how we can help each other out.
Exactly. It's about pooling our resources, our skills, our knowledge, supporting each other.
So, like, imagine a community where people are trading skills. A plumber fixes a leaky faucet, and in exchange, they get fresh produce from a local gardener.
Exactly. Or a web designer builds a website for a small business and they get childcare in return.
Those kinds of local networks, those could be really valuable if those traditional systems start to crumble.
Absolutely. They're incredibly resilient.
It's kind of like taking a step back in time, but with a modern twist. It makes me think about farmers markets, community gardens, those Skillshare workshops that are popping up everywhere.
All great examples. We can start building these resilient communities right now, today. And it's not just about practical needs either. It's about fostering those connections, that sense of belonging.
Right, like if people feel supported, empowered within their community, they're going to be better equipped to handle whatever economic storms come their way.
100%. So we've got community as a key strategy. And our sources also talked about diversifying assets, especially with precious metals like gold and silver.
Right, right. That came up earlier. But is that something everyone should be thinking about, or is that just for people with like a ton of money to invest?
Diversification is smart, no matter how much money you have. It's all about spreading your risk, not putting all your eggs in one basket.
Makes sense.
We usually think about diversification in terms of stocks, bonds, real estate, that kind of thing. But precious metals can play a role too.
Earlier, we were talking about how gold and silver can be hedges against inflation, right? But what are some practical ways for regular folks to invest in precious metals? Should we all be buying gold bars and burying them in our backyards?
Well, you could do that if you want.
Tempting.
But there are definitely more practical, more accessible ways to get started. One of our sources suggested looking into silver coins. They tend to be more affordable than gold.
Oh, okay.
And you can easily buy them from reputable dealers or even online.
So instead of buying that daily latte, maybe we should be putting that money into silver coins.
It's all about making conscious choices with your money, shifting those priorities a little bit.
Yeah, every little bit counts, right?
Exactly. Even small, consistent investments can really add up over time. And it's not just about buying physical gold or silver either. You can look into exchange-traded funds, those ETFs that track the price of precious metals.
Okay, that's good to know. So we've talked about community, diversifying assets. What about skills? Are there certain skills that become more valuable, more essential when times get tough?
Well, absolutely. Think about those skills you would need if you had to rely more on yourself, more on your community.
Okay, like what?
Practical stuff like gardening, knowing how to do basic repairs around the house, first aid, even food preservation. Those become super valuable.
It's like being a modern-day homesteader, but in the city.
Exactly. But it's not just about those practical skills. Thinking creatively, being able to solve problems, adapting to new situations. Those are all essential too.
So we need to be more well-rounded individuals.
That's a great way to put it, both in terms of what we can do and how we think.
And how do we get there?
One of the best ways is to just keep learning. Never stop being curious, never stop exploring new ideas, and definitely don't be afraid to step outside of that comfort zone.
I like that. Always be learning, always be growing. So we've gone deep on some pretty intense economic stuff, and we've talked about some ways to, maybe navigate these uncertain times. I gotta say, it's been a lot to process, but I think I have a better idea now of what it means to be prepared.
Yeah, I think that's key. Being prepared, it's not just about stocking up on supplies or having that emergency fund.
All right.
It's also about, like, having the right mindset, the right skills, the right connections.
It's about being adaptable, being resilient, being resourceful, and realizing we're not in this alone.
Exactly. And that message, it's more relevant than ever, I think, especially with all the anxiety and uncertainty out there.
No kidding. So as we wrap up this deep dive, what's the one thing you want our listeners to walk away with? What should they be thinking about as they go about their day?
I'd say this: knowledge is power, but only if we actually use it. We've talked about some potential economic problems, but we've also explored some really powerful solutions. It's up to each of us to take that knowledge and do something with it.
So it's not enough to just listen to this and then, go back to business as usual.
Right. We need to actually take steps to prepare ourselves, our families, our communities, for whatever might be coming.
Start asking those tough questions.
Yep. Like, where are you vulnerable financially? What skills do you need to work on? How can you make your community stronger?
And don't be afraid to think outside the box.
Please don't.
Maybe it's time to plant that garden you've been thinking about. Learn a new skill, even just get to know your neighbors better.
All great ideas.
And remember, even those small steps, they can make a huge difference. This deep dive has been, well, it's been a real eye-opener for me. I've got a lot to think about and a lot to talk about with my friends and family.
That's what we like to hear. These are conversations we should all be having.
Thank you so much for sharing your expertise with us today. It's been awesome diving deep with you.
The pleasure was all mine. And to our listeners, remember, stay informed, stay connected, and stay curious. We all get to create the future.
Absolutely. That's it for this deep dive into economic uncertainty. We hope you learned something new and maybe even feel a little bit more empowered to face whatever challenges might come our way. Until next time, stay safe, stay informed, and keep those conversations going.